What's going on, everybody? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and here with the advent of the upcoming ninth generation of consoles from both Sony and Microsoft with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, I want to give you a little bit of a primer, if you will, what to expect going in next generation and what we can hope happens and what we can hope doesn't happen with the ninth generations of consoles. There's mainly three different things to take into consideration when it comes to what we're hoping and what we're hoping doesn't happen and goes wrong and whatnot in the next gen. Hopefully, we have resolution to talk about, we have frame rate to talk about, and we have visual fidelity, aka graphical settings and stuff like that. But without going super into detail of all of those just yet, it all goes down to one thing. This one is developer choice, meaning hopefully the developer prioritizes the correct things and to strike the correct balance so we don't end up with another 7th and 8th console generation incident. Now, you might be wondering what I mean by that, and we'll get to that now in 1 second, because with these new upcoming consoles, we do have the potential for them to be very, very good in many different ways. The hardware, for once when it comes to consoles, is close to cutting edge. And after the massive technical failure that was the last two generations of consoles, this has someone like me, a primary PC gamer, even relatively excited. And just to give you a very brief history about it, the reason for all of this is because ever since the inception of gaming 30 plus years ago, games, how they've played, how they've designed and all, have generally been designed around 60 Hz, aka 60 frames per second. And that permeated for years and years, decades and decades, and generations, up until the 7th generation when the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 moved into high definition. This tanked the frame rates usually by at least 50%, sometimes dropping even more significantly, just to push higher resolution, higher character models, etc, etc. And over the last two generations, it's been a pretty noticeable step where if you're lucky, a game will have 30 frames per second. Usually it's in the 20s, and maybe 1 in 100 gives you 60 frames per second. But that brings us to our more upcoming modern version. We have the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Now, they have touted many different things when it comes to this, as console makers and manufacturers always do, on yourself and on me to help you remember to not trust what they say. There's generations and generations and generations at this point of evidence where they will say one thing and it will be absolutely nowhere near the case. But anyway, back to our three important things that will all be bundled together with developer choice. So, resolution. Naturally, these new consoles have been touting 4K as they do. Sometimes they even say 8K here or there. But that is a big order. That is a very, very tall order for any type of GPU. Even top-end PC GPUs. To get an extremely high frame rate, as well as proper graphical quality settings and resolution, that is just a sheer amount of pixels to push no matter what way you look at it. And I touched on the other two as well. We have graphic quality and visual fidelity, aka graphical settings. This can take many ways, shapes and forms: lighting quality, shadow quality, ambient occlusion quality, tessellation, effects, bloom, depth of field, texture quality and size, etc, etc, etc. Basically, it makes all different aspects of the game, whatever one is related to that specific setting and feature, it will increase the quality every time you turn it up. Of course, this uses more processing power and more GPU memory, so sometimes you might not be able to load up your GPU entirely with all of these features while trying to maintain a high frame rate and a high resolution. Because think about it, you're trying to push all those pixels. In the case of 4K, that's 8,294,400 pixels per frame, and you're looking to do that at maybe 60 frames per second. So you would be pushing a whopping total of 497,664,000 pixels per second, while using all of that high-end graphical fidelity and quality. That is a very, very tall order. And of course, that all ties in with what I mentioned a moment ago, frame rate. Naturally, the general gold standard has been 60 frames per second. And frankly, to me, the bare minimum of what should be a standard is considered 60 frames per second. It is factually and measurably more responsive and is what everything should be fundamentally designed as, which is why that was the standard for decades and decades and generations. But this is where balance comes in. Now, the main reason for this is when you look at the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, the Xbox One, and even the PlayStation 4, developers would typically focus on the wrong things. A great example of this, actually several great examples of this, we have Assassin's Creed Unity, the first proper true next-gen Assassin's Creed game at the time. I leave out Assassin's Creed Black Flag because that was a cross-generation release. Unity was designed specifically for modern platforms at the time. And we saw how that went. They were told by Microsoft they had X amount of power and X amount of stuff to work with. They designed it around that and it just fell apart on a technical level. So that is a great example of why it just completely missed the mark. Another great example of this I like to use is The Division 2 on the Xbox One X, which is the upgraded, more powerful version of the Xbox One. In fact, at the time of launch, it was the world's most powerful console. But again, down to hardware limitations and developer choices around these hardware limitations, they delivered an massively inferior experience. They opted to push that raw pixel count. They went for native 4K. But because of this, you were getting a very, very unsteady frame rate in the mid-20s. And not only that, you were getting it with the lowest possible and lowest ever seen visual quality settings. That's right, the world's most powerful console running The Division 2 was running at lower than the lowest quality settings on PC, and lower than the base Xbox One, and lower than the base PS4. So again, developer choice really dropped the ball on this one. And that's why going into the next generation, I want to see, with all of this hardware, the Ryzen CPUs, the Navi-based GPUs, all the memory in there, the solid-state storage, the bandwidth afforded, all the GPU RAM, I am hoping that developers will learn from their mistakes. Now, of course, that's a problem for me right there because, let's face it, they probably won't. But I'm really hoping they learn from their mistakes and they strike a proper balance. Instead of pushing for 4K max visual fidelity and getting an unsteady 30 frames per second, maybe you can push for the 4K, your medium quality settings and your 60 frames per second. Maybe in some situations they can drop it to 1800p in order to get the max video quality settings and the solid frame rate. So that's basically it. I am hoping developer choice really picks up around the hardware. At least this generation. For the Xbox One and the PS4, and in the previous generation they really did not properly design games around that hardware. But hey, hopefully later this year we'll find out.